Good afternoon. Thanks for being here. This is the session for BIM in Africa. Let's start with a brief introduction of ourselves and what we do. I am Hafiz, a director with BIM Africa and part of the planning committee for BIM Arambe Africa. It's good to have you here. So maybe we should go with the ladies first. A brief introduction about yourself and what you do. Anna, since you're right on my screen.
So my name is Annalisa. I'm Italian, but I live in France since I think 13 years now. Since 2008, I've been the chief and the president of different companies. Now I'm the president of a company. It's called Valor de Piste, BIM. That's this part. So the name is VP BIM. And I work on this company with a perspective to introduce the BIM and the AI in our work. And working on that, I meet my African competition, ONG. It's an association who work for BIM, for digital, for the training around Morocco principle and in Africa too. And so I'm here to represent them.
That's fine. Ginika?
So my name is Ginika Egwuonwu, and I am the founder of a consulting company called Links and Bridges. And Links and Bridges is just a problem-solving company focused on solving some of the problems within the construction industry. We focus on construction cost management aimed at improving profitability on projects. We focus on administrative delivery, focused at improving project success rates, and also improving business efficiencies through the adoption of technology.
Okay, Shuaib?
Hi everyone, I am Shuaib Yunos. I'm the BIM technical specialist in civil infrastructure and mining here at Baker Baines in South Africa. What we do as a company is we provide consultative expertise in terms of design and execution in many projects. And we help all of our clients and designers to facilitate positive change management in their industry. So we specialize practically in all of the major industries such as architecture, engineering, construction, process plant, energy, mining, and product design and manufacturing. So we got quite a widespread, and it has allowed us to actually get much more insight in terms of BIM and the adoption across all of those segments.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Werner?
Good afternoon. My name is Werner Maritz. I'm the Director for Industry Strategy with Oracle Construction and Engineering Global Business Unit, which is a business unit within the Oracle Corporation. At Oracle Construction and Engineering, we help project teams to connect. We help people to digitize business processes in the construction industry, and really how to leverage data across the construction project and asset life cycles. We help our customers to boost team collaboration and team productivity, increase project controls, improve construction project management, reduce risk and mitigate risk, and really unlock the data within your construction environment to help you manage your projects and programs better. As part of our organization, thank you.
No, you can go on. I thought you were done. Sorry about that.
I wanted to say we provide both on-premise and cloud software to help construction teams and portfolio management teams manage their strategic assets. And the applications that we provide is Oracle Primavera, Oracle Aconex, and Oracle Textura into the construction industry. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm super excited to have you guys, a lot of talent and experience between you guys. I would like to ask, you know, the topic of the panel is BIM in Africa. So perhaps you can give us, you know, there's been a lot of misconception about BIM, you know, some would say is this, is a 3D model, is that, is this. So Probably you can, Werner, would you give us your idea or definition of BIM? What do you see BIM as?
Yeah, for us, it's quite a wide topic. I know people talk about building information modeling and building information management. And at Oracle, we focus on both aspects, the modeling or the management. And although we are not a design company, we don't help people build the model. We actually help them to collaborate around the model and managing the information. So if you look at project processes and project lifecycle and look at information management related to BIM methodologies, it's quite a wide subject. And Ginika mentioned things like cost management on projects. So for us, we treat it as really all the information management for the entire project and asset lifecycle, and help people to really leverage digital transformation within their projects, not just the design side, but actually the whole delivery side, transitioning into asset management and maintaining those assets over their life cycle.
That's fine. Yunos, care to add more?
Like Werner has said, I mean, the data is a critical thing across the entire project. A lot of people have the misconception where BIM is actually the software. Meanwhile, it is the actual process applied to the entire workflow. It can be irrespective of a specific brand, as long as you bring in the correct tools in the correct methodology, as well as keeping data at the integral part of the project being at the center. I think that is the actual core of BIM. Rather than getting a 2D model, if you're talking about design, or if you want to go much more deeper, it's just the metadata that's built in that helps facilitate positive operations and maintenance of a project. So you want to see that project reach its design life comfortably and much more in sync with its actual design. So again, the biggest misconception is BIM equals a software. That is not really the case. It's a process.
Thank you very much for that. Ginika, as a cost specialist, what have been your perceptions so far from BIM with your relations to people?
So from my experience, I would say, I mean, what Shuaib and Werner has just said is, you know, explains what BIM is. And in terms of the perception from most non-design professionals within the industry. So, you know, when you execute a construction project, you have different team players. And within the professional body or professional side of the construction project, you have the non-design side. So those that do your cost management, the project management, and mainly the non-design team members. From our perspective, there is that common misperception of BIM being just a software because of, you know, popular software providers, you know, attaching the name of BIM to a software. So that misconception is quite prevalent. And as a result of that, hesitant and thinking, oh no, I'm not a designer, or you know, I am not a main contractor, or you know, it already creates that aversion to learning more about what BIM is because of the misconception of what BIM is.
Okay. Anna, so from what I've been said so far, what do you think we can do to improve the perception of BIM to the general population or the AEC industry?
So I think principally, the first thing is to remind these technologies are something can help us in our work. So if you want to do a first step to start on BIM, just first thing, think about all the activity you do, you don't like, are all the time the same, are not with a lot of interest, and use this activity to convert that directly in BIM. That's the first and the simple one. The second thing we have to improve is the management, data management, human management, because there are stranger things happening in this moment. everybody wants to implement new technology, new way to work with the old method management. That's not possible. So the second thing will be innovating management, make some training in this way to understand it's not just about technology and data, but it's a real human problem and a real human challenge to make BIM. The technology are now, I think, quite okay, but we need to understand what BIM is. As Ginika told us, it's really a huge thing, and that can work if we change our way to manage the team, the data, and our project too.
Okay, thank you very much. You mentioned earlier that you are from Italy. Yeah. How ready do you think Africa is for BIM?
So just to explain you, I work in France, Italy, Africa, in Ivory Coast, in North Africa. So I have today a great vision about what the BIM can be in Africa. And with my Africa competition, we start to think about the better way to improve that in the North Africa first, in Morocco. So in my experience, what was really great in Africa was to meet people are really happy to learn something new and adapt that to their way to work. In Europe was a little bit different for the first time. Everybody start with new technology. We have to improve that. I have to buy some software. In Africa, the idea was different. So that's why with my African competition, we start to think about training first and understand what BIM was.
Okay, thank you for that. Shuaib, what do you think about the government support for BIM at the moment? You know, there is this, maybe you've read the BIM Africa report. Have you read that?
I've skimmed through them, not in detail, but yeah.
Okay. There is this opinion of people that government should support BIM. Do you think that is the right approach to ensure adoption across all levels?
100%. I mean, if government implements it on a higher level, it becomes part of legislation. If you look at Europe and abroad, who are actually leading the charge in terms of BIM, like the UK, because it has become mandated across the infrastructure sector, for example, it's allowing people not only to forcefully learn it, but it's a benefit in disguise. Like, if I can give you an example, if you're forcing someone to do something really good, like parents tell their kids, I mean, you got to eat your vegetables. I mean, otherwise there's consequences. Even though that you're more or less stuck in that situation, but only down the line, you would probably realize that this force that was actually applied to you actually benefited you in the long run. And a lot of people don't see it in that way. And the reason why consultants and other firms are not adopting it here in Africa, it's because it's not a legal requirement. Once that becomes part of legislation and like tender documentation, it will force and which allow people to educate themselves based on that pressure. And it's going to lead to much more intelligent infrastructure. Another thing that goes hand in hand with that is actually the education system, because if you are grooming more and more engineers and designers as you go along, if they have the insight to how intelligent BIM is in its application, that also changes the new workforce versus the old workforce, because you're coming with innovation. So those are the two key elements, in my opinion, that will definitely drive adoption. Even though it will be seen as a forceful type of adoption, it will be highly beneficial in the long run.
Okay. Thank you very much. Werner, do you agree with what Shuaib just said? But before you comment, I would like to say something. Yeah. I would like to say something. There's something a mentor of mine always say, that when the country, when the AEC industry was going to adopt AutoCAD, you know, there was no government control, there was no force from the government. Everybody just felt, this is nice. I need this for my job, and they adopted it. So why do we think it is necessary that at this stage for BIM, it has to be government has to force people or nudge people into using BIM in their projects or into adopting BIM?
Yeah, I don't think it's 100% that we are reliant on government to give mandates. Of course, that will greatly influence the adoption of BIM on large and complex infrastructure projects funded by public sector. But when you go to trade shows, for example, in the UK, there's a lot of government work, but there's just as much private sector. And we work with many public and private sector organizations on digital transformation. And there's actually quite a big interest from project owner organizations in oil and gas sector, in the mining sector, in residential and commercial buildings to adopt BIM or to digitize the way that they're working to gain efficiency. So yeah, I agree that government mandate will help on the public sector side. I don't think we are required or dependent on that on the private sector side to do good work. I see many individual engineers really want to embrace BIM. I see companies wanting to embrace it, and that is not going to be changed by a government mandate only.
Thank you. Ginika, what is your opinion on what has been discussed? Government mandate or private sector nudge or a little bit of both? Or do you have a different opinion entirely?
Definitely agree with both Werner and Shuaib. It is a push and pull approach where government would do well to the industry if they push down the solution or the suggestion of BIM or using BIM methodologies on projects for the sake of ensuring success rates on large infrastructure projects. It would help for government to do that. At the same time, the groundwork also needs to happen within private sector and companies, individual companies playing their part on using BIM. So it's definitely a both side approach, both top and bottom approach to accelerate. So if we are speaking on accelerating the adoption of BIM, then both sides need to play a part. But if we're going to allow an organic adoption of BIM, that may take a while. And in my opinion, I think that there is a clear distinction between when AutoCAD was being adopted and BIM being adopted is that with AutoCAD, going from manual to digital, there was a clear benefit, right? You could see the immediate benefit of going digital, even though it was like 2D. But with BIM, going from 2D to 3D modeling, the benefits are subtle. So it now becomes a case of, it almost feels like a software upgrade, and using the term loosely, where it's like, oh, why do I need to get the iPhone 11 when the iPhone 10 works? So the sell becomes harder because the benefits are a lot more subtle and not so evident as going from manual to digital. So it's a harder sell.
Yeah, thank you for that. Anna, how do you think we can carry our clients along on this journey? Because they are actually an important member on this. Even if we ensure the government mandates and the firms are doing their little push here and there, we also need the clients to be involved and carried along. So Anna, do you have something to say about this?
The question about the clients is not so simple. In one side, you have some clients on private or public clients who understand very well why we need to use 3D technology, because if you can see all the drawing about BIM and digital, you can make a step back and see how many possibilities you have for new work, new offers, new way to think about our building infrastructure. But in the same time, we have some of our clients who think BIM is just the new trend. So if they have really if they need to improve that, maybe it will be better if the government help to push that and say, okay, that's not just a trend, that's a real thing, we need that, we want to go in this direction. So when we talk with our clients, it's a little bit complicated. We have to understand really well where they are, if they are already in the state of mind where the digital and BIM are important, necessary, or not. And another thing, I think we need the help of the government, because we have to remind all the people around us, our clients who maybe have studied to create building and not digital and not BIM or all of these things. So maybe they don't understand that we was in the past just architect, engineer, a constructor, and now we are architect, engineer, constructor, digital manager, data manager, and modelers and everything. So first thing, to help our client, we must to take the time to explain them what we learned in the last 10 years, because that's not so evident for everybody. So I think push them to go on public project with BIM. It's a great thing to help everybody to understand and to make the next step on digital construction.
Okay. Thank you. Would you say, what are the baby steps you would advise a new person coming into BIM, like a new company or client? Baby steps. What steps can you take in BIM adoption? The basic steps you take in BIM adoption.
The first step is to explain them how the digital can help to create value and where it can create value. A lot of time we start to say, okay, we have a BIM, we have digital, we have all nice things to use smart, and we put that in the same basket so our client don't understand nothing. So one great step can be to stay in the same table and say, okay, before how you put in this action, how many money you put in this one and this one too. Okay, now if I transform your manual action, you can talk before about 2D and 3D. If now I transform 2D on 3D or 3D on optimization, automatization, where you can have some gain, where you can have some feedback, positive feedback in your project. So that's the first step for me, to take them and explain how now that's work and where we can transform old methods in new one. That's what will be the first small step.
Okay. Yunos?
Well, the baby steps, I would say it all starts off with understanding what you're approaching. I mean, if everyone has the same picture in mind, it makes life much more easier. But I think the easiest way to clearly define the difference or the benefits of using BIM is to understand the client or the user that you're approaching. If you can understand what their current workflow processes are and how they are currently doing things in their office or in their processes, and then map that to how you would normally do it in a BIM intelligent environment, that will clearly gauge the difference in also like time, cost, intelligent automation versus manual or tedious task that they would normally do. If it's normally nice, or what we've seen recently is when a client looks at or takes their own processes as an example, because it relates to them very personally. And when you have that clear definition between the two, then it's a really nice way to open up a conversation and get much more into the deeper understandings. Sometimes you might find certain things cannot be included in that process and they will have to be done as per the user has been doing it. But if you can optimize the project lifecycle for that person at certain intervals, I mean, that is exactly what you're aiming for. Greater understanding and just understanding not only what problems the person faces, but why the solution is so pertinent to them.
Thank you very much. Werner, so far from your dealings with people, what would you say are the challenges people are facing to BIM adoption?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges that they're facing because of the environment that they're working. I think in many cases, organizations don't actually know how they manage their own information. Different parts of the organization or different parts within the project team actually manage their information in different ways. So if you don't have a common way of managing information, you can't really adopt BIM. The second one is following on information is how they communicate. People communicate today on email, WhatsApp groups. They communicate and share information on Dropbox or email attachments, FTC sites. There's no consistency in how they communicate. And there's a major reliance on Excel spreadsheets in project-based businesses. I think I've had this discussion with Ginika in the past about our biggest competitor to digital transformation is Excel. No, it is not other system, it's Excel. And then also people need to make decisions, and we expect senior people within organizations and project teams to make decisions based on information. But that information is not trustworthy, it's not timely, we can't depend on it. It's not actually based on really good data analytics. So even if we want to adopt BIM and we want to adopt digital transformation, there are certain fundamental things which need to be sorted out within the business, even long before you start talking about 3D model collaboration and federation of information. Just getting the basics right often seems to be quite a bit of a challenge for project teams. Ginika, have you had that experience as well?
Yes, I have, and I completely agree with you in terms of, you know, from the client side. I guess because you're a software seller, the client would be the professional team. So I used to work a quantity surveyor and a construction project manager. So I would be on the side where, you know, we should be one of the users of technology that supports the, you know, correct management. And as you have said, Excel is one of the biggest competitors to any other advanced way of managing information. The way is managed on project is highly fragmented. And I usually say that as a, you know, the result of projects not meeting their timeline and going over budget is a of what is actually happening in the different businesses. So we can try as much as possible to, you know, address the symptoms. Those are just symptomatic relief, where you're trying to address the scarring on your hand. But the question should be, why is your hand scarring? And that's where Werner's point comes into play, where within the individual businesses of the different team player, the way information is managed in itself is very haphazard. It's not consolidated. So half of the information is on email. The other half is on Excel. It's on, you know, your USB. It's on different systems, and that's just from one organization. So when you put the different team players together on a project, you have this disjointed fragmentation happening, and hence that contributes to projects not meeting their timeline or budgets, because there is just a hole that or a serious disconnect in the way information is managed, and that's where BIM comes in. So
the other thing, Ginika, that I think also plays a role is the way that the construction industry contract. I don't think that the contracts that we have specifically in South Africa is actually conducive to a collaborative environment where people openly share information. I think there's always an adversarial relationship between subcontractors, main contractors, owners organizations. People protect their information so that when there's a construction claim at the end of the day, you can have the upper hand in terms of those claims. So I think we even have to look at contractual relationships as a stumbling block to BIM implementation and adoption within our region.
I completely agree on that. And just to add on to what Werner said, I wrote an article specifically on that point in terms of saying that the way the construction industry is set up and the way the contracts are set up, it encourages a very adversarial environment where you have the design team on the client side. So first of all, within a construction project, there are two sides of the contractual fence. You've got the client and you've got the contractor. The client comes with his team or her team, and the contractor comes with her team or his team, and together we're trying to execute the project. So you have the design team sitting on the client side, on the other side of the contractual fence, and you have the execution of the design ideas sitting on the other side of the contractual fence. As a result, there's already a contractual divide that encourages a non-collaborative environment. So even if we bring BIM into the conversation, there's always still going to be that, by the very nature of the way construction is, it's capital intensive, it is, people's money's at stake. So at the back of every person's mind is trying to cover their legal, cover every legal aspect, which fosters a non-collaborative environment. However, if you push the design responsibility to the same side, contractual side, as the design execution, which is the contractor and all his subcontractors, then you automatically have taken down one of the barriers that that is created within the construction execution. You've taken out one of the barriers, then there's a greater environment and incentive to collaborate.
So do you think that a design-build environment is more conducive than a design-bid-build, which we often see with the EPCM environment? So design-build, is that your preference in terms of execution methodology for BIM adoption?
Definitely. From one of the projects that I worked on as a project manager, in which one of the design team members introduced a BIM-enabled software. We were a lot more encouraged to use the software because contractually, it was a design and build project. Contractually, if the project failed, then we are all responsible for the failure of that project. Yes, definitely. The short answer is yes. A design and build approach encourages collaboration.
And as if, of course, design build is not a popular way for our public sector infrastructure development programs. There's always an extensive bidding phase and bidding war, if I may call it that, and that is definitely not conducive to BIM. And those are some of the challenges we see with customer engagements, so as stumbling blocks to BIM adoption.
Sorry about this point because it's really interesting. Something happened to me in France some years ago. Was my first project on BIM. It was exactly what you described. Our client had the idea to take everybody in the same place, and before the construction starts, we was one team. We, designer, with constructor, was a temporary team. So we was obliged to use BIM because the project was a Frank Gehry project. So if you look at the 3D, you cannot build that without BIM. Was, I think, 10 years ago, maybe something more. Nobody have a contract on BIM. BIM was was necessary to build that. So I completely agree with this vision. I remind something really great. We work together for the project using the new technology because the new technology helps us. So if we can find this way to improve BIM and technology in all the projects, the new problem will be not the BIM of digital, will be the great way to build our contract, and the technology will help us. That will be the future, I think. We have to think about that. It was really great to work in this way.
Thank you very much, Werner, Ginika, and Anna. But so far from my experience so far, I've always seen people as the greatest challenge to BIM. So, and from what you've discussed so far, it still involves the people. It's the people involved that would make those decisions. So I don't know, Yunos, do you have something to say about it, or you support the fact that people are actually the major barrier to BIM adoption? When people change their opinion or are willing to accept new things, then we can now see changes across board.
Yes, if you look at a process, as long as a process is laid down, and if you follow it to the T, it will work, right? If you look at technology, technology is an enabler. It helps streamline the process. And the only, if I could call it the wild card or the out of the box or interfering factor there is human nature. I mean, if you had to program an AI or something like that to run a script or run through a certain algorithm, 100% it will work. There's no interference. It goes through the motions and it gets to the end. Whereas human behavior, perception, and also, again, it comes back to understanding, adoption, implementation. Like has been highlighted here. I mean, if you don't have a common data environment or you don't have the fundamentals right, everything else goes out the window, irrespective of how fancy of an approach you have. So it does come down to actual human behavior, human adoption, human perception, resistance to change, those type of things. But if you remove the human element from it, a process will 100% work, but we can't do that. There's no way of doing that unless we become cyborgs in the future, which is a bit, another topic. But definitely human behavior and adoption. I mean, if the perception comes right and we all stick to the common plan, it will definitely work. But again, humans, we are the wild cards, unfortunately.
And do you think Africa needs its own standard, you know, to take care of the peculiarities of contracts, like Ginika said, peculiarities of contracts and human relation in terms of in the AEC industry in Africa?
Yes, I mean, it will be nice to have our own standard that's tailored to our continent or to per country. Of course, the UK or the 19650 is quite great, and it can be used as a basis or foundation. It's a very thorough document that can be used to guide those processes. However, challenges and perceptions faced per country, as well as the way we adopt certain methodologies and how we do things, are slightly different. So if you could have something that's more custom to your country or to your market, more relevant to you, get the minds that are educated and more up to standard about it, put them together and work on something for the greater good of your country or your city. I think that's a great place to start, but we have to get the groundwork right. It always comes back to that. And I think everyone has been saying that throughout this podcast. So that's my view on it.
Thank you very much. Ginika, you brought up the contract issue. Do you think we need a specific standard in Africa?
I agree with Shuaib. We do need our own standards because, you know, within the West, contracts developed within the West are mainly developed with the premise function or work or certain legislations already in place. So as a result of that, you know, you don't need to drill into details covering certain loopholes that existed in the, you know, from a legislative point of view, which we have in Africa, quite prevalent in Africa, where different governments, without, being sounding without insulting the governments, but different governments lack with the proper legislation governing a sector of like the built environment as the West would have. So a typical contract is already based on that assumption that certain aspects are covered. But within Africa, the different governments don't even have the basics covered as yet, which creates a lot of loopholes when you just take fully developed Western contract to apply it here on the continent.
But I would also like to add that, do you know that most of the contracts we use here are actually something we adopted from the UK? They're actually standard contracts we adopted from the US, the UK, and stuff from over there. So they are using it in line with their standards for BIM, and it's working for them. So what do you think we should do to that? Because if you say we need our own standards here, to write our own standards, that is, we are still writing standards to augment what we copied from over there. I don't know if you get what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying. It works for them because different parts of society already works. So that portion, if you take that portion of the 19650, or if you just take it as is, and you implement it in an environment like a typical African environment. I haven't gone into full details of what the 19650 contains, but my understanding is that certain topics that may not be discussed within that document, certain topics that are not discussed within that document is not done so because, it's discussed somewhere else, it's covered by legislation, for example. But within our context, we already have a need for legislation that governs the built environment. For example, in Nigeria or in Ghana, I don't know what, to what extent that there are legislative laws to govern the built environment. I don't know if it exists. I know South Africa has different mandates, hence the mandate for like a governing council that takes responsibility for the construction industry. Things like that are already ironed out. So when you have your 19650, you don't need to go into details to cover different aspects of the rabbit hole when it comes to the contractual side or implementation of it, because it's been covered elsewhere. My point is, we don't have to start from scratch, but we definitely need to look at the loopholes that already exist. We can't take it as is because certain things are not already covered that should be covered.
Thank you very much. Your opinion is plug the loopholes. Anna, what is your opinion?
It's very important was this point. I work on Africa and on South America. And in South America, I give you this experience because it was really strange for me. When I arrived in Chile, Chile is really far from England. When I arrived in Chile to work in a huge project, was a Santiago airport, the first thing the client gave us to work was the UK standard. So it's nice. You can start from something, you don't start from zero. But think now in the other side, all the people coming from Chile have to work like UK. That is not the same rule. If you think about, for example, data property, I'm pretty sure in all our countries it's not the same. So you are in Chile, you work like UK. So for me, the project in Ivory Coast, we work like Paris. Okay, there are really a connection between Ivory Coast and between France, Ivory Coast. There are a lot of connection, but Ivory Coast is not France. So I think, and that was the same idea for the Morocco. We don't start to zero because we need something different. We need to improve something is done somewhere else, in France, in Europe, everywhere in the world, you can take that, you can take this huge experience and adapt to your country, because it's different way to think, it's different way to create contracts. So some standard will be the same. But we start to zero to create a language, for example, we can use the same IFC or kind of ISC, for example, or something like that. But we need to adapt that to the country and the way to create the contract and data and everything like that. So it's really important, because it's a no sense if you work like UK or France and you are on the other side of the world. So you can take this experience and adapt that.
Hafiz, can I add some comment on that?
Definitely, I was going to call on you.
I think when you look at international standards for the ISO 19650 series, there is allowance for a country-specific addendum to be done. For example, in coding and classification, every country may have their own, and even within Africa, it will not be the same. We can't have one standard in Africa because it's different. But we should really consider, and if something taught us over the last couple of 3 months about a global pandemic, it doesn't matter where you are to be able to do work. So we should not make an Africa or region-specific standard in the BIM environment, which will isolate us from the rest of the world. Because the whole idea of building information modeling is to standardize the approach, right? So at the moment, I can sit in Johannesburg and do work for a North American company or for a European company. The European company can do work for any country in Africa, except for the physical construction work on site. The rest of the project team can be located anywhere in the world. So we should not make a standard to isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. And I think that's the whole intention of ISO standards, is to have a certain level of standardization across the world. Even if we look at interoperability of data promoted by Building Smart, IFC models, or BIM collaboration format, those things are meant to be promoting interoperability. So we should not isolate ourselves and say we need an African standard to adopt BIM in Africa. You can have a regional or a country-specific addendum to those standards as is required. But we should not make an Africa-specific BIM standard.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Ginika doesn't agree with me.
It's not that I don't agree with you. It's I see your point, but the question that came to my mind was, what if a project goes wrong? You know, what happens when things go wrong? The whole idea of having something, I hear that there's an addendum, but you know, it works. The idea of having a universal standard is based on the premise that we are all on the same level. Whether it's from a technological or infrastructure investment point of view, whether it's from a cultural, social context, you know, social understanding, cultural understanding, that's the premise, right? So in terms of creating one standard, we are all, it sounds theoretically and ideologically correct and great, but I don't know if it works in practice, because you need to imagine a situation where everything goes wrong on a project. What does that look like in a common data environment? What does that look like?
Ginika, I was going to ask, okay, with this your comment, what if I'm a contractor and I want to go and get a job in the UK? What standards do you think I should use? If I have a different standard for Africa and there's a different standard for Europe, what standard do you think we would adopt for that project?
First of all, the UK will probably have its own standards of awarding a tender, whether from the private sector or the public sector. There will be a list of requirements, whether it's governance relating to your business, relating to your, you know, to your experience and things like that. If you're able to pass all those hurdles and you turn out to be the ideal candidate, then the next question is, how will the project be implemented or run? The fact that you've passed, the test and the hurdles, and you are accredited, run that project in a foreign country, and you're coming from Africa, then you're basically on par with the UK, and you are operating in that environment which it was created for, then there should be no issues. But that's the environment it was created for. In a situation where the environment is here, where we have different hurdles, where certain governments are don't always enforce contracts. Let's start with that. So different African governments don't always enforce a contract or uphold the law. So certain, I'm sure you're probably aware of certain cases where big construction companies working on large infrastructure projects, the contract or the contractual side of such a project is not pinned on the government necessarily. Some of them try to create an escape route where the highest courts they can take it to, or the law abiding to it, is the international courts, so that the contract is the obligations and the terms of contract. That's because of the failure of the government in itself that the project has been executed in. That is one situation. That's just one of the challenges that trying to create a universal standard faces.
And one thing to bring this discussion about standard, I think there are two types of standard, technological standard and human. Human, we're not standard, I'm pretty sure. Technological, we can try, but just think about that. Building Smart is not one Building Smart. Building Smart Association creates a local reality for all the countries. With my African competition, we create we create now the Morocco Building Smart local action. That's mean everybody know we can have something really similar for technology, but there are for every country something different. Unfortunately, it's dependent. I think we have all right, because it's a really complicated situation to marry culture and technology. I'm sure if everywhere all the standard technology will be the same, will be more simple to work together. But inside our own country, we have the same problem in the region about different type of buildings. So will be more simple for everybody to have the same standard. But I think we are not prepared to that. We are not culturally prepared to have one standard for everybody. So it's a long discussion between culture point of view and technical point of view.
Yes, I agree. I have a question for Werner. Mr. Werner, tell me, if you are advocating for a uniform standard, in a situation where someone from an African country, not South Africa, let's say someone from Nigeria, right, is working on a project that is in the UK, for example, and we're using the 19650 standard. Let's say everything goes wrong on that project, and we've been working with in a common data environment. How would you propose that would be handled if everything goes wrong? Just maybe there's non-payment, and usually when I say things going wrong, it ends up being contractual, and different countries enforce contracts and laws in different ways. How would you envision that playing out with a standardized 19650?
So the purpose of ISO 19650 is to talk about information management. And there are certain guidances how to manage that information within a common data environment. That associated with the UK addendum in terms of how information is coded and classified, it gives a view of what needs to be done. If the project is in the UK, it is most probably, and I think definitely done under UK law. And if it's a public sector project, it's an NEC type of contract. So the whole purpose of why we want to implement BIM on projects is to prevent exactly what you are describing. Everything goes wrong. Okay, so implementing BIM according to standards with internationally recognized contracts, that is supposedly stopping projects from going horribly wrong. Okay, so if that same UK company operates in South Africa, Nigeria, the contract will be signed under a specific law. South African law, Kenya law, what does it matter? Okay. All I'm saying is from how we manage information on projects. Why would we want to manage it differently in Africa? And Africa is a very big place with very diverse practices. Do you propose that we have a BIM standard for every country in Africa? Or do you propose we look at what the world's doing in ISO standards, and as we should, we do a country-specific addendum for coding and classification and local practices? But what is going to happen if the project goes wrong is the same as any other situation. Look at the local law, look at the contract under which you've done the work. It's not to say because the guy is from Nigeria, all of a sudden there's a different law that's going to apply to that specific company because they are on a UK project. It is the law under which the contract is signed that will be there. But we cannot have different information management standards. If we say Africa needs different information management standards, well, then we better make sure every software vendor supplying BIM-related software to Africa complies to 50 how many countries in Africa's got their own BIM standards. It's not going to happen. So we have to be rational about how we do this. It's a global approach. That's why there's an ISO standard, not the UK standard anymore. And we should embrace that with local changes, of course, to the addendum. I'm not sure whether that answers your question, Ginika. I'm not sure what you're worried about. The guy in Nigeria, is he going to end up in jail? If that's in the wrong, he's going to end up in jail. If it's not in the wrong, then he's in the clear. Okay. But all I'm saying is from a standards point of view, be careful not to advocate absolute African standards because we will, as a continent, isolate ourselves. And the whole purpose is not to isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. And I think the last 3 months certainly told me, don't isolate yourself. As long as you've got internet connection, you can work wherever you are in the world. Digital transformation has been accelerated in 2020. So we should embrace that.
Quite interesting. That's a very viewpoint, a very important viewpoint. So what do you think? Yunos, you're based in South Africa, right?
That's correct.
How would you rate BIM adoption there presently on projects from a scale of 1 to 10?
Okay, that is a very hard answer to give you because it's a sliding scale. I mean, you can't really predict it. Like, I'm in the civil infrastructure and mining space, so sometimes you would find certain firms adopting it 10 out of 10. I mean, like Werner said, I mean, private sector actually like champions it in terms of their processes and their drive, even though that it's not mandated by government. Whereas you get the smaller firms or the firms that are getting more into it or more acknowledgement of BIM, adopting it in segments, in pieces as they're going along. So I can't give you a definitive answer, to be quite honest, but the awareness and the level of BIM is really intriguing people more and more in South Africa. We're seeing a lot of much more insightful designs. We're seeing people understanding that technology is the enabler, right? And they're not getting it the other way around. But in terms of the adoption rating and how they would take it, it varies. It's a very, very erratic way to look at it. You can't really put a number to it.
Maybe it ranges from 1 to 10, if the scale is from 1 to 10.
Yeah, we can just inclusive.
So, Ginika, you're also based in South Africa, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you agree with Werner on his comments on BIM adoption for South Africa?
Werner and Shuaib's comments, I agree with them. I think it's still at a very it's not yet stable. We can't put a stable a collective reading on it yet because of the various levels of adoption from the private and public sector. And even within the private sector, there are also varying levels of adoption within that as well.
Werner, your company works generally Africa-wide, So what would you say about BIM adoption generally in Africa from your interactions with people and firms?
Yes, our company works globally, but I specifically have a lot of interaction in Africa. And I think if I think 3 years ago, when we talked about BIM, it was completely foreign in Africa. And with Africa, I want to include Mauritius. It wasn't a concept that people considered, certainly the mining industry, they completely ignored it. Many of the EPCM companies said they will only do it if the customer insists on it. There was a big argument about internet speed. You know, a lot of the BIM applications are cloud-based, and those servers don't necessarily sit in Africa. A lot of them sit in Europe. And people just said, well, there's no internet. The internet is not dependable. We can't do it. And if we fast forward 3 years and discounting the pandemic's effect, I think there's definitely more of an awareness throughout the country. There are certain sectors, and I think those sectors are driven by individuals inside the sector who is rapidly adopting BIM. So you see BIM champions within organizations influencing how that organization is adopting BIM, not because the organization itself one day thought it's a great idea, but because there's a visionary champion within that organization that drives BIM adoption. So I think it's much more these days. If I go to customers, they actually ask me about BIM standards, open BIM. They ask about model collaboration. They ask about information federation. They ask about common data environment. And I think that is rapidly changing. And I made a comment about I want to include Mauritius. In Mauritius, I've actually seen some of the most advanced thinking about adopting BIM that I've seen in any of the African countries. But definitely, we've made a lot of progress over the last 3 years as a continent in terms of how we talk about it. We've got some great skills. We've got pockets of excellence within the industry. Unfortunately, there is still the situation where a service provider would say, well, if my customer doesn't ask me for it, I'm not going to do it. There's lots of questions about who's going to pay for it, because there's a perceived additional cost in terms of man hours up front, who's going to pay for it. So we certainly still see some challenges. I think there's still an internet problem in some parts of Africa, where internet is switched off for some political reasons every now and again. But at least in the centers, I interact a lot with Kenya. There's good internet. South Africa's got internet. Nigeria's got good internet. So there are countries with enough stability to actually start leveraging these cloud-based common data environments for collaboration.
Thank you very much. It's been quite an interesting conversation and discussion having you guys. And unfortunately, even I would like to continue this discussion, but time is up. So I would like to say thank you very much for your time. Thank you for having me. So probably see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.